Hello and welcome back to the 20th Century Dude channel. We're going to take a huge chomp out of today's sea delicacies, and boy oh boy, we are going to have a huge whale of a time. Well, more like shark anyway. Today's Features of the Month review, we're not only going to be reviewing 2 films, but 3, all shark themed. We are all going to be reviewing shark movies. We got the 1970s blockbuster classic Jaws, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. We also have Sharknado, of all movies, which was something that was made once. And Meg 2: The Trench, which, the sequel to The Meg, where Jason Statham fights giant megalodons on jet skis. I know what you're thinking. This is a lot of shark material to take in. So I think we're going to need a bigger boat. I'm sorry, that joke was not funny. I'm sorry. Also want to apologize for not releasing this Features of the Month about a week or 2 ago like I wanted to, but I think for October I will have more time for generating YouTube content. Well, for a mixed variety of reasons I have more time, but anyway, that's why I'm going to be putting more stuff out, hopefully more efficiently. Anyway, let's begin. The first film we're revealing is Jaws. And I'd say that the movie still holds up pretty well for going on, 50 years. The film is, as they say it, timeless. There's nothing in here that ages poorly, and for a story that critics lambasted back in the day, everything in here holds up pretty well, especially considering the current state of movies and how hard it is to apparently write a decent story these days. Well, without the writers using ChatGPT anyway. Sure, we also have to consider the fact that there are a few shots in here where maybe it was clear the shark was animatronic, although we'd have to factor in the production problems for that. For a little behind-the-scenes trivia, there were 3 animatronic sharks, all named Bruce, but all of them were of varying quality. One shark sank, another one apparently blew up, so getting one of these sharks to work became harder than literally pulling teeth, or dealing with a toddler in the middle of their terrible twos phase. However, the lack of sharks actually worked in the movie's favor, considering it added an extra level of eeriness and intrigue to the creature. Honestly, if we did see more of the shark, I feel it would add nothing to the overall picture and even detract a little. I don't think the movie would have quite the intrigue it did if the shark was all over the place, visible at all times. Something maybe the Meg movies could learn a thing or two about. Nowadays, you could just easily CG in some sharks anywhere, but, we'll get to that contrast in a bit. It's amazing this film even pulled through, considering all the production problems this movie had. The 35mm film they were shooting on even fell out the water at one point, but thankfully they managed to salvage that. There's also a shot in here where Chief Brody is talking, but the shot quickly fades away right in the middle of the conversation. And if one thing always distracted me in this movie, and again, this is more of a nitpick if anything, it's actually that. So it makes me wonder if that part of the work print was not salvageable for whatever reason. I wish I could say the same for the, countless SD cards I've lost over the years with important things that were on there and I no longer have access to. But anyways, the character work is also extremely good in this movie. The character work with Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss works incredibly well. So well, in fact, that the best scene in the movie doesn't even include the shark at all. It's just the 3 of them listening to Robert Shaw's conversation about his incident on the USS Indianapolis.
It's kind of like old squares in a battle, like you see in a calendar, like the Battle of Waterloo, and the idea was, shark comes to the nearest man, that man he starts pounding and hollering and screaming. Sometimes the shark would go away. Sometimes he wouldn't go away. Sometimes that shark, he looks right into you, right into your eyes. The thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you. And those black eyes roll over white, and then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red, and in spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces. By the end of that first dawn, lost 100 men. I don't know how many sharks, maybe 1,000. I don't know how many men. They average 6 an hour. On Thursday morning, Chief, I bumped into a friend of mine, Herbie Robinson from Cleveland. Baseball player, bosun's mate. I thought he was asleep. Reached over to wake him up. Bobbed up and down in the water. It was like a kind of top. Upended. Well, he'd been bitten in half below the waist. Noon the 5th day, Mr. Hooper, Lockheed Ventura. So he swung in low and he saw us. He was a young pilot, a lot younger than Mr. Hooper anyway. He saw us and he come in low, and 3 hours later, a big fat PBY comes down and started to pick us up. You know, that was the time I was most frightened, waiting for my turn. I'll never put on a life jacket again.
But that's it for Jaws. Now it's time for the doozies. The second film on the list is the first Sharknado film, and I was aware of these films' reputation for a long time, but I've never seen a Sharknado film until now. And what I ended up watching was, well, let's just say interesting. It's somewhat on par with another movie I reviewed on Features of the Month called Suburban Sasquatch, although they have differing levels of badness if you want to consider that. You could say that Sharknado has a better production value than Suburban Sasquatch, but not as much charm. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Sasquatches, we're here to talk about sharks. So Sharknado is another film about shark attacks, although it adds about the silliest twist you can think about. Instead of sharks just naturally attacking people in the ocean, they come in the form of tornadoes, hence why it's called Sharknado. The premise is so absurdly silly and ridiculous, and I can only imagine what it would have been like for filmmakers to make the pitch to the studio board that day. Somehow this film got made, and many sequels followed. The premise is silly, as I said, the acting is not great as you'd probably imagine, the special effects are goofy, which is no surprise due to the cheesiness of the film's execution and budget, of course. And Sharknado is just pure schlock from beginning to end. Honestly, while it's a film about shark attacks, the film's structure probably has more in common with The Birds than something like Jaws. And if you've seen The Birds, then you probably know what I'm talking about. I also want to bring up the fact that the casting is also a bit questionable. I mean, they cast like a guy's kids, but they don't look that much younger than he does, so I guess somebody must have been blind in the casting room that day or something. But in the end, the sharks, or rather the Sharknadoes, are defeated after a family bands together to save the day, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Sharknado definitely did feel pretty predictable at times. It's not exactly a shocker of a film, unless you were the one viewer who had no idea what the heck this even was, and was not prepared for its absurd nature and cult legacy. I'm also glad that it didn't end up being extremely gory, even though there were tendencies where it was violent at times, but I was okay with that. I suppose that begs the question that, since I've watched the first one, will I bother to watch the rest? Well, that depends on my mood and desire, I suppose. If they purposely get cheaper but lack the fun of this one, then probably not. But if they remain consistent with this one, then maybe I'll watch like one or two more. But I mean, it's also Sharknado, so there's that. The last film we were reviewing is the second Meg film, Meg 2, The Trench. And it's definitely a movie for sure. It happened once, it was pitched to a studio committee, and people ended up making it, probably for a boatload of money. And it happened. It's the sequel to The Meg, if you remember that movie from who knows how many years ago. I also want to point out the most crucial detail of the movie, which most of you probably know about to begin with. And it's the climax of the film where Jason Statham is on a jet ski throwing harpoons at megalodon sharks. That's the hook. That is probably what is going to grab people and see the movie. Other than that, there is nothing in here you absolutely need to see. Nobody feels like a genuine real person, and things just happen, and even sort of retcon a little bit of character motivations from the first movie, which, even though I only watched that like a day or two ago, I'm kind of forgetting about it already. But that's it. That's the only reason to watch this movie, is Jason Statham fighting megalodons. It's absurd and silly, but that's why we want to see it. Maybe not as absurd as Sharknado, because that's the silliest of all of these movies, but I think you get the point. There's also dinosaurs and a giant squid now for some reason. They're in the movie, apparently. Now, out of these three films, which of the three do I recommend the most? That's easy. It's Sharknado. I'm just kidding. It's obviously Jaws. I mean, that's kind of a no brainer. Although, if I did have to pick a close second, it definitely would be Sharknado, though. Sorry, Meg 2. Jaws is the obvious timeless classic that has, in its 50 years of existence, has still stood the test of time. And as much as both Sharknado and Meg 2 The Trench are both very silly, I think Sharknado is surprisingly more engaging, even though the acting is worse and the special effects are worse, although maybe that's kind of why people enjoy it more. Meg 2 has schlock, but it doesn't come off as fun. And if you're waiting for it to reach peak absolute absurdity, you're going to have to wait about 2/3 of the way through the movie for that to happen. But yes, of the three, Jaws is definitely the best movie, but Meg 2 is the least of the three. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Thank you for tuning into the 20th Century Dude channel, and I'm not sure what next month's features entry is going to be, although I hope you'll like it no matter what it is, so you'll have to stand by and find out. Thank you for tuning in today and hope to catch you on the fly. See ya.